I got started in this from my grandfather's influence. He was not a workers' compensation lawyer. He was an assembly line worker that worked for a bread manufacturing company in Philadelphia. And that company was was no longer in existence, but he had worked at this company for many, many years. And in 1953, when he was the foreman of this assembly line at this plant in Philadelphia, one of the women workers who was on the line, the assembly line, was not wearing a hairnet. She got her hair stuck and caught in the assembly line process, and it basically ripped her scalp right off. He saw the whole thing and he stopped the presses and he rushed to her to try to help her. And she's screaming, and he grabbed her and grabbed her scalp and ran with her and her scalp to his car, where he drove her to the hospital and waited with her for her while she was undergoing surgery for her scalp. And he was all bloody, working from midnight to 8 a.m. That was his shift. So he's standing there, waiting there in the wee hours of the morning with her in the operating room, and he's in the waiting area, all bloody. Not much he can do at that point. Finally, as the day broke and things started opening, he ended up getting her flowers and a teddy bear or something like that, and said, "Don't you worry, we're going to take good care of you. You really got hurt." And went back to the plant, where the people started drifting in and the management started coming in around 8, 9 o'clock in the morning, and said to them, "Hey, listen, there was a nasty accident last night," explained what happened. And they basically turned their cheek at her and said, "We are not going to help her. In fact, she's fired because she didn't comply with wearing a hairnet, and we're not going to ever talk to her. You could let her know she's fired." And my grandfather was appalled at that and couldn't understand why they would treat her that way. Why anybody would treat anyone that way. And so he told me this story after I had graduated law school. And he said, "Jeff, you could do anything you want." He called me Jeffy, actually. He said, "Jeffy, you could do anything you want with your life as a lawyer. You could be a divorce lawyer, you could be a criminal lawyer, a tax lawyer, but the little guy needs your help. And that's the worker." And he told me this story. And I was so taken aback by the story that it stuck with me in the back of my head. Then I started working for a firm. Yeah, the actual firm was Omitsky, Welsh, Rosenthal, and Steinberg, but Joe Messa got his start there, and he was actually my mentor. And he came into me on a Friday afternoon and he said, "Hey, Jeff, what do you know about workers' compensation?" I said, "Nothing." He said, "Okay, here are the three statutes, the three books on workers' comp that are all the statute in Pennsylvania. Go home tonight, read them over the weekend, and then when you come in on Monday, I have a new client for you to help represent." And I said, "Oh my God, how am I going to do this?" I went home. I literally spent the entire weekend reading this, took notes, thought I was the king of the world and I could conquer anything having to do with workers' compensation at that point. Came back in on Monday. I met with this poor guy and his family. And it turns out that this guy was driving a beer truck from Golden, Colorado to New York City, and he lived in Cheltenham, outside in Philadelphia. And while he was in Pennsylvania, trying to make the trip in a one fell swoop time period, so that he would get a bonus that he would get if you made it within a certain number of hours from A to B, he fell asleep at the wheel because he was trying his hardest to make this time to get his bonus. And because he fell asleep at the wheel on Route 80 in upstate Pennsylvania, he literally went over an embankment and almost died. The entire load of beer was ruined. The truck was ruined, and they had to airlift him from the accident site to the University of Pennsylvania Hospital. I think it was Presbyterian where he actually went. And I met with him because they had denied his claim, saying that they weren't paying him. He lost the entire load, and they were pissed off. And so, after having read the statute on workers' compensation, the entire thing, I know that Pennsylvania workers' compensation is a no-fault act, meaning it doesn't matter whose fault the accident is, whether it's your fault, my fault, his fault, you're still entitled to workers' compensation as long as you didn't intentionally cause the accident or the disability that you have. And sure enough, this poor guy did not do that. He was trying to make his bonus, and it just so happened he ran out of gas, so to speak, and he passed out at the wheel. But I had to litigate that case from the beginning to the end. It took a relatively long time. Eventually, I won the entirety of the claim, and this guy got paid, and he got paid everything he was entitled to, and he got paid all of his medical bills, and I was helpful in getting him to a doctor throughout the entire time and making sure his surgeons would continue to see him. And I took the deposition of three of his surgeons, and I took his deposition, all because the insurance company refused to pay. And when we got into court for his testimony, the judge looked at me after I was done taking his testimony. The judge looked at me and looked at the other lawyer and kicked everyone out of the room, including my client and his family, and yelled and screamed at my opposing counsel, "How can you not pick up this claim? Go tell your client that the judge is telling you to accept this claim." That's what the judge said. And this other attorney on the other side said, "The judge, I recommended that they do that, but they're not going to accept the claim." And so he said, "Mr. Gross, you go put on all your evidence, and then we'll see what happens at the end of the case." And I did, not knowing that, I was going to win. I thought maybe I could win. The judge was really angry, but who knew, right? It was my first case. And I did all of my evidence, and I did it religiously, and I did it to the letter of the law, just like I was reading and what needed to be done procedurally. And at the end of the time period for litigation, I won the case, and I won everything you could think of. I won the attorney's fee. I won an unreasonable contest attorney's fee. I got a penalty for them failing to properly investigate and follow the rule of the law. I got him his wages. I got him interest on that back wages. I got him ongoing payments into the future, and all the medical bills were paid in accordance with the decision. It was actually one of the happiest days of my professional life because it was something that I had put my heart and soul into. When you put your heart and soul into something and it pans out, you can betcha you're going to be happy. So at the end of the case, they came in, and I actually told them the story about my grandfather, but I had explained what they won. I explained to them where we were going, and sure enough, they were happy. It was like a big celebration.
Yeah.
I had just graduated law school. This was in 1991.
Wow.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I'll never forget it. And this was in the spring of 1992 that I won.
Right.
And so when I won that, I was so happy that I decided this is what I want to do. I don't want to do anything else. I don't want to do personal injury anymore, or this or that or the other thing. This is what I want to do. And slowly but surely, I started getting more and more cases, and I developed a nice little book of business with my cases, all because I just felt so satisfied by helping these people achieve what they needed to achieve. My grandfather used to say, and my grandfather was my hero in my life. He really was. Um, but he used to tell me, he used to say, if you could help someone, why wouldn't you? Help people as best as you can. It's the only thing you have for you to for yourself. If you can't help people, you're of no good to this world,
Yep.
basically. The defense was very similar to the reasoning behind when my grandfather had that woman had her scalp when she was basically decapitated almost by the assembly line process. The same kind of a defense that was in play there was in play here. In that case, though, the woman decided not to do anything because she was afraid she wouldn't be able to not only win, but she would never get a job anywhere else. And she just kind of put her tail between her legs and wandered off into the sunset. But had she done something, I don't know what the courts would have done back then in the 1950s, but I will tell you that it's called a violation of a positive work order. If there's a sign on the side of the wall that said hair nets must be worn, and you don't have your hairnet on, and you have an injury because you don't have your hairnet on, that's a defense under the workers' comp law. In this case, was a little different. There was no positive work order other than the statement that you're not allowed to sleep on the job. Well, if you're not allowed to sleep on the job and you involuntarily fall asleep because you're trying to make a bonus that they gave you the incentive to achieve, then it's hardly an intentional issue, and it takes away from that violation of positive work order. But that was their defense, and they knew they weren't going to prevail. But the attorney on the other side was given these marching orders, and so when he said, "I can't settle this case, Your Honor," the judge just said, "Fine, you do what you do. Mr. Gross will do what he does, and I'll take care of the rest." And he did. And it was justice served. It really was. And I was so happy at the end of that.